All right, man, we are live again. Okay. John's having some technical issues, so I'm just waiting for him to resolve that. And I'll add him to the live training once I see him in here. In the meanwhile, we're gonna get started. I'm not gonna hold back. Okay. So today's topic is the marriage game changer, a husband's emotional self-sufficiency. So let me kind of set the context of what you can expect. Okay. So, emotional self sufficiency is when you, as a husband, can actually control your emotions, right? And that too easily without getting triggered by any external circumstances. Okay. It's kind of like a state of emotional stability, clarity, balance, where you have to, you have dealt with a lot of your insecurities, right? Oh, here he is. All right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Welcome. I can, yeah. Problem solved?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so going back to that, so it's a state of emotional stability and clarity, and it's a balance where you have dealt with a lot of your insecurities, right? And everybody has insecurities because it's just part of a development process of a boy turning into an adult and all the challenges and hiccups that come with that, right? So a man who does not operate from his bullets because he actually has pulled them, well, he achieves emotional self sufficiency, which allows him to get rid of things like codependency, desperation, fear, and any unwanted behaviors from his life. Now, a man who does not have his emotions under control is to be feared, right? Because his actions are unpredictable, unreliable, and oftentimes can lead to dangerous stuff. So, in the context of marriage, this becomes very important because not being able to control your emotions will eventually destroy your marriage long term if it hasn't already started it, right? So there's literally not a single area in marriage where your emotional stability wouldn't have an impact on it. Okay. And the scary part in all of this is the spillover effect that takes place, right? You may feel like there's lack of emotional stability in one area in your marriage or impacting only one area in your marriage. And then you start to notice all of a sudden that it has spread out everywhere in your relationship. It's kind of like a virus, right? And this emotional stability virus, let's call it, is not only infectious in the different parts of your marriage, but also to other people. It spreads like COVID or any other virus onto other people, right? So the less emotionally stable you are, the more others around you project the same type of instability because they'll be reacting to you. And this also works the other way, right? Where the, the no matter how emotionally unstable somebody is, your emotional stability can mitigate their emotional instability. Okay, so both it works both ways. So today, John and I are going to kind of go through the various areas of marriage where lack of emotional self-sufficiency is most damaging, and we want to, demonstrate these with clear examples of how this may show up in your marriage, in your family, and we want to do all this in the hopes of that you can start to identify, relate to some of these areas and how they might be actually showing up in your life, because we're not some of the things you're going to notice in the marriage areas that we're going to be talking about, you might notice it outside of marriage as well. Okay. And listen, if you have been following us, then you already know that we don't just talk about the topic, but also give you actionable steps, right, to resolve the challenges. And we're going to have another 8 free resources that are valued over $1,000. So these resources will be given out as we go along the training, and these resources have changed tens of thousands of husbands' lives, right, and their families for the better. So make sure to stick around. And yeah, other than that, let's kind of get started with the first area of marriage where lack of emotional self-sufficiency will have a big impact on your relationship. Okay, let me bring that up here. So communication. All right, so this is the most obvious place where lack of emotional self-sufficiency shows up in your marriage. It's one thing to, not have the tools to be able to communicate with the feminine effectively, but being emotionally unstable and constantly triggered by your wife makes things all that much worse. Okay. So common symptoms that kind of might have you relate to this: interrupting. Your wife is talking and you're constantly cutting her off. Justifying, right? Your wife says XYZ and you or accuses you or something, and you start going into justification, defending mode, right? Avoiding topics, right? Wife wants to talk about a topic, but you don't want to talk about it, or you're dismissing it. Yelling, having the need to be right, right? You start to make it like a competition with your wife, and she thinks she's right, you think you're right, and you just force the fact that you're right. Over explaining, right? Something your wife brings up, again, accuses you or something, and you need to over explain it to make sure that she understands it the way that you want her to understand it, because then if she understands it well, then she will no longer blame you or accuse you, right? Finishing her sentences, right? Not being present and actually hearing what she's saying. Walking out of the conversation. And even to the degree physically threatening, right? Throwing things around, hitting things around you in reaction, okay? So these are some symptoms, just a few symptoms to list, which there's obviously more, but I'm sure you can relate to some of these, and you have probably done them before. I know John and I have, right? So now, being able to communicate with your wife effectively is one of the most important things in marriage. It has such a big role, right? Not just to provide information to one another around yourself or your kids or about her. It's much more than that, right? Communication and how it's done speaks volumes to the stability of your marriage. And both of you have a role in ensuring it is effective. However, I do have to say this. While both of you have a role in it, you have to keep focus on your role, because that's what you can control. So I don't want you to take this, you both have a role in it, and start going at your wife. She's not doing her job, okay? I want you to focus on your role when it comes to communication, because your leadership can enroll her into doing her role. And you have to be able to lead your wife into effective communication, right? Because that is the only way she will reciprocate it and do her role in her part as the feminine. Now, if you're experiencing relationship challenges, this is all the more important. This idea of leading her. So you focusing on your area of communication, what your role is, doing that really well, and then leading her in that, so that then later she can reciprocate it. If your relationship is not working well, don't expect her to lead in this area, because she's been giving you signs and signals for 2+ years. So in her mind, it doesn't matter how she communicates with you, it's not getting through to you. That's why you need to lead in that part. Now, when you are emotionally self-sufficient, which has you communicate, effectively with the feminine from a healthy masculine place, it will have a tremendous positive impact on many other areas of your marriage that are actually vital for rebuilding your marriage and to have it be sustainable long term.
Yeah, and you mentioned communication, and I think for a lot of men, they're going to hear that as how they're actually verbally communicating, right? And how they speak with their wife. But communication is not just about what's being said or how you say it. Communication is also about, and with respect to your wife, it's even more important. It's your ability to listen, right? Your ability to be present. And how often have you heard that most men or most people listen to respond rather than to actually understand?
Yeah.
Okay, they're just waiting for a gap in the conversation. They're waiting for, hey, when can I say what's on my mind? And if you're thinking about what's on your mind, you're not actually being present to what the other person is sharing, right? So I really want people to start to relate to communication as not just what you're verbally communicating, but also what are you communicating with your body language? What are you communicating by your presence? What are you communicating by your ability to actually listen? And we're going to dive a bit deeper into these now, I think, in our next area, which where emotional self-sufficiency has such a great impact. So yeah, let's look at safety and security.
Yeah, and just I think if you've been following us for a while, you'll know that these are not just sort of individual points. Each point that we cover, we always attempt to show the connection with each other, because none of these are silos in themselves where they can operate, or if you just take care of that, then you'll be fine. They're all connected, and there's dependency on each other with respect to these areas. Okay, so the next up is safety and security. Now, this is the most important thing for your wife in the marriage. The emotional safety and security specifically. Safety and security in general, but emotional safety and security. Okay, it is more important than financial safety and security, mental, spiritual, or even physical safety and security. This is a feminine need for your wife that is your job to provide, your job to fulfill. And I've said this before, it's not her job the other way around, okay? It is not your wife's role to fulfill your emotional needs, okay? You should be getting that from other places, like your men, right? In other words, from healthy masculine relationships. One of the key ways to provide emotional safety and security is to have your wife feel heard, understood, appreciated, and valued. Now, this happens through communication, both verbal and nonverbal. When she experiences those four things, right? Again, they are being heard, understood, appreciated, valued. Then it creates emotional safety for her in marriage and also around herself. And what I mean by that is around herself as a woman, as a wife, and potentially as a mother. Okay? Now, let me just take 30 seconds to kind of dig in. Having your wife feel heard means that she gets, that you get how she's feeling. Having your wife feel understood means that she gets, that you get what her commitment is behind how she feels. Having your wife feel appreciated means that you are able to appreciate the commitment behind her feelings. And notice, for you to know her commitments, you need to know her feelings. For you to be able to appreciate her, you need to know her commitment. But for that, you need to know her feelings. It's all connected, right? And then your wife to feel valued, you need to be able to communicate the personal value that you are deriving from her because of her commitment. Okay? These are foundational stuff. Now, when you are emotionally not self-sufficient, you cannot have her feel heard, understood, appreciated, and valued. Why? Well, because you're constantly distracted by the triggers around you, which caused the symptoms that I shared in the previous section to come into effect, come into action. Now, if you are emotionally self-sufficient, there's nothing your wife can say or do that will trigger you. And I know this sounds bozo and voodoo, but this is achievable. It's an achievable state for you as a husband. And we see it all the time, okay? This is what we do. So if you cannot be triggered by your wife because she can say and do whatever she wants, then you can be fully present and provide what the feminine needs for its emotional safety and security. And the reward for doing that, the reward for doing that is that your wife will flourish in her feminine and will have zero problems providing you with your wants and desires in reciprocation of your efforts. Now, if you decide not to make these efforts, not to invest this energy into this, and do what's necessary to provide emotional safety and security for your wife, you are, I don't want to just throw stats out, but I will anyways, but you are increasing the probability at least tenfold for emotional affairs to occur, which can turn into physical affairs, as well as, separation, divorce, even restraining orders.
Like, we haven't touched on it yet today, but I really want to remind men that the bulletproof husband, it's all operating from that place of ownership and responsibility. Right? If men are looking at this, and everything we speak about at the bulletproof husband is from that place of ownership and responsibility. So you dealing with your emotions is not like, it's not one part of a deal where, hey, if I do A, well, then I automatically get B from her. Right? It's the case of you doing A, and in this case, providing a safe space, because it's reflective of who you are as a husband. It's not going to be, well, I'm doing this, but in return, she better do this other thing. Yes, there will be benefits to your relationship, but the driver for you doing this is not what those benefits will be. The driver can come from, and should come from, your actions being reflective of who you are as a husband, who you need to be, who you want to be. Mm-hmm. And yes, there are benefits beyond that. But as I said, the driver is, hey, how am I turning up as a husband? How am I being responsible and taking ownership for that role as a husband?
Yeah. No, very well said. Yeah, ownership is a big key part of all of this. And, look, it nicely leads into the next section, because a big component of ownership as well is confidence. Okay, so this is the other area. This is the next area, specifically the third area. Now, neither of these are in order of importance, okay? Some are more important than others, but they're all important and they're all interconnected. So confidence. When a man becomes more and more, emotionally self-sufficient, what happens is his natural confidence rises with that, okay? There are many things you can do to increase your confidence as a man, father, and husband in the short term. Like, okay, on demand, kind of, I need to increase my confidence, so I'm going to take action and it'll increase. However, here's the thing. There are very few things you can do to increase it long-term, permanently, okay? And it is critical that you learn how, you learn the permanent side, the long-term side of confidence. Because here's the thing, if your natural confidence rises and you don't have to constantly worry about it, you don't have to constantly manually refill or manufacture your short-term confidence, then your life will be happier, and you're going to start to experience some freedom as a man. Now, there are two things that impact long-term confidence, but they are kind of tied together. Okay, one depends on the other. So when you increase your competence, right, your ability to be knowledgeable and to successfully see things through, when you increase your competence, it increases your confidence. When you have higher confidence, it motivates you to increase your competence further, right? The more you do this cycle, the higher your natural confidence rises. However, I have to say that the most common barrier in place to do this cycle consistently are your bullets, right? So when you have dealt with your bullets and become emotionally self-sufficient, which is really the second thing that you can do to increase your long-term permanent confidence, what happens is your ability and motivation to become more competent starts to increase along with your confidence to do so, okay? And this is because removing your bullets removes the fears that are in the way to get into this confidence competence cycle, right? And when you remove the fear, it ensures that you are taking the actions around the competence as necessary, which then increases your confidence. So really the first step is become emotionally self-sufficient. Achieve emotional self-sufficiency while using short-term confidence tools to still be at a high level of confidence, because you always want to be confident, but the short-term tools require you to do it more, to be aware of it. It's not a natural way of doing it. But you still need short-term confidence, especially when you're doing self-sufficiency work. So once you achieved emotional self-sufficiency, then you can kind of go to step 2, which is you start increasing your competence as a man, father, and husband. Okay? And as you can see, the long-term permanent confidence relies heavily on competence and confidence cycle, right? Actually, let me rephrase that. The permanent confidence relies heavily on competence, but then competence relies heavily on being emotionally self-sufficient. So I'm hoping you're starting to kind of see the connections here. All right?
Yeah, and confidence for sure is a key component in that whole cycle. And the challenge for men, as you well know, when they come into TBH, what's one of the big things that they're lacking is confidence. Why? Because they've just taken a huge hit, also known as a slap. The certainty around the future has suddenly become very uncertain. This family unit that, at the backbone of their existence has suddenly, as I said, it has a lot of doubt around it. And that's why it's one of the key areas that we address initially with men, because without that confidence, it's very hard to progress. It's very hard to even enter a conversation around doing emotional work.
Yeah.
Because there's such a basis of confidence that is required to even allow men to go to the depths of what emotional work requires. And the other component is, I invite men to look at what are some areas of your life unrelated to your relationship where you can actually see that relationship as I got more confident, I got more competent. As I got more competent, I got more confidence, right? It's that cycle. They're intertwined. Maybe it was a position you took on at work, or even going back to, one of the great ones, for me at least, is when you learn how to drive, right? Your confidence and your competence are pretty low, right? Until you spend time at the experience of driving.
He's a crazy driver, by the way.
Way better driver than you. And
I do admit that. But you're crazy too.
More confident?
I wouldn't call it that.
Yeah, but again, right, you go back to that cycle of the relationship between confidence and competence, and time spent in that area, in that the activity of that experience. And it's no different to self-sufficiency around the emotional work. There is time spent that's required to increase the confidence and to increase the competence in that arena. So,
yeah.
That's all you need to do, Andre. Increase the time spent.
Exactly. Practice more, right? Well, you do have a few years on me, so maybe I'll catch up. Who knows? No, I don't think I can catch up. I don't think I'll be ever as crazy driver as you are. I've had some experiences with you that are just wild. Pushed my boundaries and limits. So, yeah, don't ever go on an ATV with this guy. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Okay, the next one will be, if I can bring it up here, is decision making. Now, again, I want you to stay focused on looking at the different connections between these elements, okay? Now, decision-making is a healthy masculine trait that is very, very, very important for the feminine, okay? To be more clear, it's very important for the feminine that the masculine can make quick and sound decisions, like on the fly, through preparation, or even through preparation, doesn't really matter. But as long as decisions are confident, quick, and sound, that's all that matters. Yes, your wife may change your decision later. Or, she's asking you to pick a restaurant, and you pick one, but then you end up going to the other one because she changed her mind. That's fine. That's not the key thing here. The key thing is being decisive, right? The faster and more confident your decision making is, the more it serves the relationship. Here's the thing though, for this to happen, you must have a high level of confidence. You must have a structure that allows you to prioritize quickly and be effective, right? The foundations on which you are making these decisions must have some sort of structure behind it. And you must be emotionally stable to do all that. And it makes sense, right? Like if you're not emotionally stable when it comes to decision making, then other forces are at play because of your bullets, your insecurities, right? Some examples of these forces could be, the need to please your wife, or the need to feel in control over your wife, or the need to be right against your wife, right? Another one is the need to, avoid the fear of consequences from your wife for potentially making the wrong decision. And these are just a few possible reasons. I just want to give you some so you can relate. But these can show up as signs that you are not emotionally self-sufficient, and how it starts to impact your decision making, and how you're doubting yourself around that. However, when you can actually make decisions effectively without overthinking them, due to the fears that are at play, caused by mainly your bullets, because your bullets are your drivers for a lot of your fears, then at that point you're providing a very impactful and powerful service to your marriage and for the feminine within the marriage.
Yeah, and you touched on it briefly there, but I just want to highlight it again, that emotional self-sufficiency does not just apply in your ability as a masculine man to make decisions, right? And that ability not to get triggered. And the ability not to get triggered comes in when, as per Andre's example, like your wife changes your mind, or you make a decision about where you're going for dinner, and she says, no, I don't want to go there. Let's go to this other place, right? So the ability to make the decision in the first place required emotional self-sufficiency to be masculine. And it's also required not to get triggered by why'd she bother asking me? If she's just going to go change her mind, why didn't she make the decision? And it's a critical component of that, the flip side of the situation.
Yeah.
And anything relating to your terms, you should not be changing your mind on. You may change an execution with regards, hey, how can I make A and B happen? A being, a term-related item, B being something that she wants you to do. But at no expense should the A item, should your term item be changed by her. Your terms are who you are as a man. So to change your mind about that is going against who you are.
Yeah, compromising yourself.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about this later as we move along. Okay. Now let's look at the next one, which is attraction. So this is not news to you, but I'm going to put it out there because you might be in this category whether you know it or not. But a needy, codependent and desperate husband is not attractive. Never ever can a man like that be attractive. And the reason behind it is because it screams of danger for the feminine, right? Uncertainty. And one of your other roles as a husband is to provide certainty for your wife. For you to provide certainty to her, you must provide certainty for yourself in who you are as a man and how you see yourself as a man, right? You cannot build a house for somebody else unless you have done it before for yourself. Okay? Same here. So certainty provides safety and security in all areas of life, not only for you but also for her, right? When the feminine feels that there's safety and security, when she sees her husband as emotionally self-sufficient, confident, decisive, and purposeful, like it skyrockets her attraction to you. And the reason for this is that attraction for the feminine is much more emotional than physical. Like, have you ever walked on the street and actually seen this beautiful, gorgeous woman with, a not so handsome man? And you've asked yourself, like, how's this possible? How could that guy get that girl? Right? Even when there's no, finances are not at play. Because I know one of the first things you're going through right now is, of course, he has a lot of money. That's why. But I've seen this many times. where finances were not at play, either because the woman was very well off, or they were both not well off. Okay, now this happens because of this emotional component, right? It becomes, this emotional connection is very important to the feminine, and it becomes, I'll say foundational. It becomes foundational for attraction, right? And the key items for emotional connection to actually have a strong kind of pull effect are the ones that, we mentioned it before, right? I told you we're going to be connecting how each of these connect. Each section we went through so far, it's connected to the previous ones or multiple of the previous ones. Same here. Okay? Decisiveness, confidence, safety and security, communication. All of these are connected through how emotionally self-sufficient you are as a man, father, and a husband. And it feeds her emotional stability. And the more emotionally stable she is, the more emotionally stable you are, the stronger the attraction. Okay? If you want to have your wife be more attracted to you, then focus on becoming emotionally self-sufficient and then mastering each of these areas, each of these items we spoke about so far.
I'm still smiling. I'm still smiling in my head, right? And just about your opening line in relation to this section, and a needy, codependent, desperate husband is not attractive.
Yeah.
And yes, 100%, there are a lot of men who enter TBH, and that's where they're operating from, right? And it's unfortunate because there is a better way, there is a different way, and that's what they come to learn. But irrespective of what a wife needs, irrespective of what the relationship needs, it's kind of hard to take on that a man would settle for that description of himself. A needy, codependent, desperate husband. It's sad. Like it's sad, as I said, because there's so much more available. And ironically, a man will settle for something like that, will settle for that description of himself because of his bullets and insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
He will look at it and go, hey, well, maybe I'm not capable of anything more. Maybe I don't deserve any more. Maybe this is as good as it gets for me. And it's so not. Right? And we see it day in, day out, week in, week out, with men who really do transform themselves and powerfully move away from being needy, codependent, desperate husbands. And it's awesome to see it, right? That access to a greater version of themselves is actually themselves.
It's a game changer because when a man, in my opinion, when a man steps into that realm, the initial reason that started him on that journey becomes still important, but becomes less important, right? This idea of saving my marriage desperately, right? Then that man is showing up from a different place. And that to me is what's really powerful. All right, let's look at the next area, which is parenting and co-parenting, okay? There are a dozen areas that we could still look at and consider around, emotional self-sufficiency and its impact. But to stay in integrity and to really look at the degree of impact, like speaking to co-parenting and parenting it's just another big one. I mean, the bulletproof husband exists because we want to empower husbands to be the best version of themselves. And why? Well, so that no child has to experience the pain of a broken home. Right? TBH is really about helping husbands in a reactive manner, right? To help them rebuild their marriage. And when I say reactive, I mean men come to us and they need help, and we're reacting to their situation. Now, why would we do that? Because it doesn't sound, proactivity is better, right? Well, the reason we do this is because we know that when mom and dad are good together, everything is good at home, it benefits the children tremendously. Okay? Because the goal is to create generational change in the children through the parents. And we want to do this because when the children become adults, they do not make the same mistakes. They do not have to bear the consequences of the same challenges because they have the power over themselves. And that's our goal. So within this reactive approach, there's this embedded proactive approach towards the future of the children, right? And no need to say that, how you parent as a father and the co-parenting relationship that you have with the mother of your kids, with the mother of your child, really regardless if you are married or divorced or just in a, not married, but in a long-term committed relationship, it doesn't really matter. But it's so important, so critical, right? A father and husband who is not emotionally self-sufficient and is ridden by bullets, insecurities, will simply not be able to demonstrate to his children the type of man that, his son should become, or the type of husband his daughter should marry. This is a fact. And you probably knew this, but in case not, like, your son will become someone like you. Your daughter will marry someone like you, right? So providing the role model to them from a very healthy masculine place with emotional self-sufficiency, emotional stability, and certainty. Like, it's not only important, but foundational to set your kids up for success, which parent wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah, and you're going back to that comment about your daughter will marry someone like you, or the complete opposite of you, depending on how well you do your job. She will either be like so repelled by how you turn up that she will want nothing in her future husband because of what foundation you've laid down. Or if you knock it out of the park, she will seek all those qualities in her life partner because she knows what a quality man actually looks like, right? And just on the challenges, I guess, around parenting, co-parenting, but looking at a man within TBH, right? Men within TBH hit roadblocks on their journey. Not all plain sailing once a man is in TBH, right? There's just challenges. Different challenges come up at different stages for different men, depending on their experience, depending on their bullets and insecurities. But if a man hits a roadblock within TBH, he often starts to question, hey, am I capable? Am I capable of getting beyond that roadblock? Is it worth the effort to get beyond the roadblock? Do I deserve to get beyond the roadblock?
Yeah.
And in those moments, we get a man grounded back in it. If he has kids, what do they deserve? Do they deserve him to expend that effort, to expel, to actually do the work? Right? Even if in that moment, looking at whatever the roadblock is, whether it's emotional work, whatever it is, whatever he's challenged by, what do his kids deserve from him? Knowing that, hey, my sons are going to grow up to be like me, and my daughter is going to marry someone like me. And in 99% of the cases, those men continue to do the work because they get grounded in, okay, my kids deserve it. You talk about generational change. Like, that's why we have so much respect for the men in our tribe, because they are doing the work to cause generational change. They're not just invested in their relationship today, they're invested in future relationships, which makes it so powerful.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to be forward looking, but that's where the real change happens, really, at the generation level, right? When you're able to go from reactive to proactive. And parents have a huge role in that. Yeah. Okay, before we go to the next topic, so we kind of gone through a lot of areas where emotional self-sufficiency is impacting marriage. Before we go into the next topic, and that next topic is going to be how to stop blaming your wife. I want to give you some actionable steps so that you can actually get started implementing some of these concepts, okay? And the way we're going to do that right now, these are some of the free resources. We have a hard copy book This allows you to learn and implement what we've talked about so far in the training. And it is a 330-page hard copy book, okay? 4.6 stars on Amazon and thousands of copies sold. Very, very good book with all the tools detailed, okay? Now, we get that the book will take some time to arrive to you. So what we're also doing is we're throwing in bonus trainings, 3 of them, and a template that will be available right away, okay? Now, to get the book, put book in the comments, and then John will send you the link where you can grab the book. There is a small cost associated with shipping and handling to be fully transparent, which I'm sure you understand. But depending on where you're located, we're talking anything from 10 to 15 bucks. And once you take care of that, we'll ship you the book, and you'll also get the login credentials to the 3 trainings as well as that template. Okay? Okay. So put book in the comments if you're ready for this. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the next topic, which is how to stop blaming your wife. Now, let me kind of set the context for this a little bit, right? Like, blaming your wife in marriage is what happens is it gives you, what's the best way to say this? It gives you an immediate relief of responsibility, ownership, commitment, right? And really looking at yourself from those perspectives of responsibility, ownership, and commitment. It is very addictive, in fact, to the point where you pointing the finger becomes a norm. And I can also guarantee you that if you blame your wife for things in the marriage or for any reason, then you are most likely doing a lot of this blaming in other areas of your life, where you are, not demonstrating responsibility from a place of ownership and commitment. Now, there are 3 ways men can blame. Well, women as well. In general, a human being can blame 3 ways in his life. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into those and kind of take a step back from just purely talking about blaming your wife, okay? And the reason why I want to do this is because if you understand why blame happens and how it shows up in your life, right, then it's not only that you can stop it with your wife, but then you can start recognizing how it shows up in other areas of your life and stop it there as well, okay? And, as we said this many times before, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, okay? So let's look at these 3 ways a man can blame. And then we're going to also go into, at the end, what is the underlying reason why any one of these blames happen, okay? So the first one is blaming yourself, okay? Blaming yourself is when you have taken certain actions, they didn't pan out the way you wanted it to, and you look at yourself and you blame yourself that you are the reason why XYZ failed. You are the reason why she's hurting. You are the reason why the project wasn't completed. You are the reason, and your abilities or lack thereof, that, so-and-so is no longer talking to you, right? So blaming internally towards yourself. Now, the second type of blaming is when you're blaming others, okay? And you've probably done this before. I know I have in my life. John's perfect. He's never blamed others other than me. So blaming others is when... Exactly. Blaming others is when you look outside from yourself. So you're not blaming yourself, but now you're looking at other people, that they are the cause of the potential negative outcome or the circumstance that you're in, right? And we can start doing examples, like all the other examples that we've talked about before. You didn't get the project done. The project wasn't finished on time. So-and-so is not talking to you. So-and-so is hurting. And then you look at others, blaming them for the situation happening. So these 2, you're probably familiar with, but I want to put it out there. Now the third one is a little bit different, in the sense that it's about blaming the system. Okay, so blaming the system, and I'll put it in quotation marks, the system is basically, when you look at the government, for example, blaming the government is an example of blaming the system. You work at a company, at a corporation, and they're not doing some of the processes are not the way that they should be. So you're blaming the system. Okay. The rich versus the poor, you're blaming the system. Okay. So these are the three examples of how we blame. We blame ourselves, we blame others, or we blame the system. Okay. There's no really other way to blame. Those are the three targets, if you will, for blaming. Now, what you need to understand is that blame is emotionally driven. Okay? The only reason somebody would blame is because they have bullets in place that don't allow them to take responsibility, ownership over what's happening in their life. In other words, they are out of control. Because when a man is in control and he can actually surrender to the commitment of responsibility and ownership in a way where nothing is happening to him, but he is the one that's making things happen. When you're coming from that context, you're not blaming. There's no way you can blame, because you're constantly looking at yourself and asking, where am I responsible or in all of this? What is the lesson to learn? And what is the lesson that I can learn to then improve from here on? And when you come from that place, blame goes right out the window. Now, you can't really come from that place unless you're looking for a scapegoat. The only reason you would be looking for a scapegoat is because you're not emotionally self-sufficient. So when you get rid of your bullets and you become emotionally self-sufficient, okay, then blame starts to disappear from your life, because you're able to now choose to step into responsibility and ownership. And you become in control of your circumstances versus your circumstances controlling you.
Yeah, and just to hammer that point home, right, with respect to responsibility. And the big difference between being 100% responsible versus even 99% responsible. Like, the man will say, wow, I'm being 99% responsible. Like, I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to being there. I'm pretty close to actually owning my life. But if you look at, the tire on your car, or the wheel on your bike, and it's inflated to the perfect PSI, exactly as it should be. That for me is 100% represent, and that can represent 100% responsibility, right? Now you put a nail in that tire. Suddenly, it's not as sound as it once was. And if that nail represents you being 1% irresponsible, what's the impact of that? Over time, it's going to seep away all the 99% of being responsible. That 1% of being irresponsible actually has a huge impact on the entirety of 100% being responsible, or the 99% remaining. So that 1% is actually doing the damage. So yes, as awesome as it is that you're being 99% responsible, pay attention to why you're not being 100% responsible. Because 100% responsible represents that fully inflated tire, that perfect wheel that's ready to get you from A to B. But if you mess with the integrity of that by taking out the responsibility, you're actually really impacting your ability to go from A to B without, breaking down, without stopping at every gas station to reinflate, without making all these pit stops along the way, because you're not stepping into being 100% responsible.
It's kind of like a backdoor too, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some way, shape, or form. You're leaving. It doesn't matter if it's 1% or doesn't matter if it's 1% not responsible or 99% not responsible. You're leaving that back door open from fully committing to it. Yeah. Okay. So, while these may seem very obvious, the emotionally driven side is the critical part to take away here. Now that you understand the three different targets for blaming, and you get it that it's driven by emotions and undealt, bullets. Translate this into your marriage, right? You're blaming your wife, and by the way, it goes the other way too. Okay, when your wife is blaming you, I'm not saying that's okay or not okay. What I'm saying is now you start to understand that when your wife is blaming, where it's coming from. When you are blaming your wife, where it's coming from. Okay. Before we go into the next topic, which will be, don't pursue your wife until you do this, and I'll talk about the this. I want to throw some more resources at you, okay? Because, again, I want to equip you. And maybe the previous resources that I gave you, they're not really your style, or you don't want to do, read a book, okay? So the next resource I'm going to throw out is a free coaching call with a training. So you watch the training, and at the end, you'll get a link to actually book a call with one of our coaches. Okay? It's a free 1 hour, no obligation, there's options for you to do after, but you don't have to. And it's a solid 1 hour coaching call, no BS. Each of our coaches know that their goal is that you leave a different man than when you came on the call, having something discovered about yourself, seeing something about yourself that you didn't see before. Okay, so very valuable call. Okay, put call in the comments, and then John will send you a link. And in the meanwhile, let's go into the next topic. Don't pursue your wife until you do this. So a little context around what we're going to be talking about. So when a marriage is in the trenches, husbands oftentimes attempt to, pursue their wife. It's kind of like a last-ditch effort to show affection and appreciation. Not even a last-ditch effort, because sometimes it happens in the beginning. Now, this 99% of the time doesn't work when trying to save your marriage, okay? The only reason you know your marriage is in trouble and really aware is because your wife gave you the slap. This is the, I love you, but not in love with you. I want to divorce or separate. I cheated on you, or you found about it somehow that she cheated on you. So the only reason you know that things are really bad in the marriage is because you got the slap, right? Now, the time when your wife gives you the slap is when she's no longer trusting you at all, right? Like nada, nothing, zero, no trust at all, right? She felt suffocated more and more leading up to it. She has lost her identity more and more. She's checked out, and like most women, she believes the grass is greener on the other side without you, okay? And the biggest takeaway here is that trust is at zero, okay? Now, how does pursuit kind of have to do with all of that? That's what we're going to go into, okay? This is what we're going to speak to now for the next few minutes, and look at the relationship of pursuit with the relationship, trust with the relationship, and then how pursuit and trust are related or within the relationship. Okay, so let's look at the first one, which is pursuit in relationship. So obviously pursuit is part of the relationship. It's a component, whether it's emotional or physical pursuit. Okay, now your wife, when she gives you the slap, wants nothing to do with the relationship at all. So pursuit being part of the relationship, in her mind, she doesn't want to do anything with pursuit because she doesn't want to do anything that's connected to the relationship between you and her. Okay? She doesn't want to talk about it or act on it in any way, shape, or form. Okay? Especially physical. Because the foundation for physical intimacy is emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy typically comes first before it goes into intimate physical. Okay? Okay, now let's look at trust in a relationship. So trust is foundational to a healthy relationship for obvious reasons, right? But without trust and knowing how to implement it, you're doomed. You need to be able to choose to trust. Here's the thing though, trust implementation for you is very different than for your wife. So trust for the masculine is a choice. It's not a feeling. But trust for your wife is a feeling. The feminine feels, then acts. The masculine acts and then feels. So your feelings can be controlled and derived from the actions you take. For your wife, it's the opposite. She feels, and those feelings guide her actions. Okay? So her trusting you is going to be heavily dependent on how you make her feel, or how she perceives you make her feel, how she perceives herself making her feel, right? And all the different components that impact her feelings. But trust for your side is more of a choice. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, I don't really relate to that because I don't feel like I can trust my wife. And I get that. We've done a live about this, and we have some other videos. I highly recommend you watch them. Those are bullet-driven behaviors. The reason why you think trust is a feeling is because your bullets are protecting you to avoid trusting somebody that has hurt you in the past. Why? Because you don't know how to deal with the hurt. And removing a bullet is suppressed hurt. When you get rid of suppressed hurt, it no longer impacts you. There's no more threat. So you have the ability to choose to trust, or to choose not to trust somebody, which is also fine, but it's no longer emotionally driven. And that's a healthy masculine way of relating to trust and making decisions around trust, versus from a place of fear or threat that you're going to get hurt again. Okay? Now, let's look at the relationship of pursuit and trust, because there's a level of dependency here. Okay? So if you pursue your wife before rebuilding trust, she will think that you are manipulating her back to the relationship, which, if you're honest with yourself, in a way it's accurate. But the problem is she'll kind of catch on to that. Okay? So even if you manage to get laid or have some degree of success in pursuing her, it will bite you in the butt later on, right? If trust has not been rebuilt. Because pursuit for her is more emotional than physical. If she doesn't trust you, she's not emotionally connected to you. If she's not emotionally connected to you, then pursuit will be seen as a manipulative tactic only, nothing else. Okay? So that's kind of the relationship. I wanted to define it each. So trust in the relationship, pursuit in the relationship, and how the two kind of come together, and the dependency on each other. Okay? Now, there is one exception. And we've talked about this idea of management of the relationship, which is your wife's role. Okay? So the exception is, and what that means is the only time you can and should pursue your wife before actually trust being rebuilt is if she's directly requested it in a masculine way. And what do I mean by that? Like, hey, I want you to pursue me. It's been a problem in our relationship that I have not been pursued. I don't feel desired. I want you to pursue me. That's a direct way of saying it. It's black and white. Okay? Now, this represents this other side, this 1% from the kind of 99% of the stat above. Because we said, do not pursue your wife without having rebuilt trust. 99% of the time, it's not going to work. This is the 1%, okay? The exception. And it is very rare, okay? Very rare. It's very rare that it's the problem, and it's very rare that woman can directly, masculine way communicate it to you. And if she is, awesome. Your job has been made easy because now you know what to do. John, anything you want to add?
And yeah, and even in that 1%, you do it once it doesn't compromise your terms. But we just come back to something earlier from the earlier section around that needy, desperate, codependent husband. That's a big driver when men enter TBH as well. Like, I think a lot of that connection, the desire to pursue, is also driven from the place of insecurity. It's driven from that, hey, well, at least if she has sex with me, she must still love me. Right? So it's not even about the manipulation of her. It's about trying to get to that place of control and security for him, going, okay, at least if I get this little lifeline, then there might still be home. Oh, imagine if I give her an orgasm. How is she going to walk away from that? Like, it's as I said, it's that insecurity is a huge driver that creates that desperation. Like that needy, codependent, desperate husband doesn't just change overnight.
Yeah.
Right? It takes time. It takes time to move away from that, to learn a better way. And in that window, that's why hey, ignoring that there's no trust being built. Ignore the fact that, hey, she just gave you the slap. Like, she is emotionally checked out. Men will, turn a blind eye to all of that because of the desperation. Hey, I need something to hold on to, because they think that's the access to, hey, this is how it's going to be restored. And it's the complete opposite is how it's going to be restored.
Yeah. It's really certainty what you're talking about. Like, the man is looking for certainty from her, whereas certainty should be something you're self-sufficient in. You should be creating your own certainty. One, because you cannot provide certainty for her, which is very important. But she's looking from you to get that. You should not be looking to get certainty from her. It's nice if you have it. Don't misunderstand me. You can want it and desire it from her, but you shouldn't need it from her, right? Okay, cool. Before we go into our last topic, which is internal freedom for you as a man, I'd like to throw another free resource at you, okay? And this is our daily marriage mentorship kind of program, okay? And it's very simple. It's a daily email with a testimonial and awesome tools and contextual approaches to marriage, right? Like this one, right? When we're talking about pursuit. I have a whole section sometimes on pursuit for a whole week in these daily emails. So if you want to subscribe to these daily emails, just put in daily in the comments, and then John or I will shoot you the link to subscribe. And then from there on, you'll kind of get a daily email from me ongoingly. Okay. And I'm talking daily. Okay. So that means like Monday to Sunday. I'm not just talking about during the weekdays. I'm talking literally every day. So, right. With links, so that on Sunday, it's a culmination of all of them with links. Okay. So even if you miss a few throughout the week, you'll have a culmination, an aggregate email that has all that week's emails. It's pretty cool, powerful. Okay. Let us go into our last topic, which is internal freedom for you as a man. Okay. Now, being in marriage can, I'm using this word cautiously, often feel like being in a prison. Okay. Conflicting situation where you kind of want to be committed to your family, but you just don't have the tools, the guidance, the know-how on how to navigate the marriage waters, right? You want to avoid arguments, fights, ineffective communication, but you just don't really know how. And because of this, you feel like you are kind of losing your masculinity. In other words, you feel you're getting emasculated, and your freedom is just kind of going away. Things are becoming more monotonous, not boring, the wife's nagging. So all of this in a way is kind of true, because once you do get married and have kids, the freedom that you're used to have as kind of like a stallion out there, dating or just having the freedom to do whatever you want with your time, obviously that's no longer there. But I do have to say that doesn't mean you cannot feel a sense of freedom as a man. You absolutely can, and it will come from a different place than before. In fact, I do believe it will come from a more powerful place than before, a more meaningful place than before. Okay? Because feeling free as a man in marriage, it requires you to ensure that you are super dialed in on a few items that bring that kind of sensation. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at those few items. One of them will be terms which we already said earlier that we're going to touch more on. Okay, so let's look at that. We're going to look at specifically three. First one will be terms. So what are terms? John, you want to talk to this, or you want me to talk to it? I can talk to it, but I just know you're very good. Yeah, okay. So terms are kind of like a compass in life and marriage. Okay, these are the kind of the only things that you can control. These are your non-negotiables. Terms define. Listen to this. Terms define the total sum of your masculine identity. Okay, in a way it's actually very personal to you. So I may have a term that sounds very similar to yours, yet the way it plays out in our life will look different. Okay, example, I am a man that takes care of his family's safety and security, financially, emotionally, physically. That's one of my terms. Another one of my terms is I am a man that makes a difference in other men's lives, right? Now, you may have these same terms, but they'll play out different. These are my non-negotiables. These are my guiding principles in all areas of my life. Okay. Now, knowing your terms and never compromising them gains your respect from your wife and also others. Okay. It also provides you with a sense of clarity of what you represent as a man, as a father, as a husband. And because of that clarity, this leads to a sense of freedom, right? You're no longer lost in the desert. You're no longer walking around blind, not knowing when to, put the line in the sand, whether it's a conversation with your kids, whether it's a conversation with your wife. Terms allow you to know what that line in the sand is, because anything that's term related is non-negotiable. Anything outside of your term, you should have the flexibility. Now, one of the things to be careful with is to not start to put things as terms that shouldn't be terms, that are not really terms. It's one of the things that men fall into. They have desires and wants that they want to make into terms, and that doesn't work. And we go through this in our membership in detail. We guide you and help you in getting your terms up and running so that you get clear and take all that bullshit away where you're trying to fit things in that you shouldn't be fitting in. Okay, now let's look at the next one, which is purpose. So having a sense of freedom is also tied to having a purpose outside of your family. Okay, not for a lot of men, purpose is their family. I'm saying outside of your family. Okay, it's important. Why? So that you can take purposeful action anytime you want on them, because this allows you to further control your level of confidence and self-worth added on top of that. Okay. When you are making a positive difference in other people's lives, like ongoingly through your purpose, right? What happens is it makes you proud of yourself. It increases your self-worth, because it becomes very difficult for you to have a low self-worth, a low self-esteem, and low confidence when you are making a difference in other people's lives. And that's what purpose is about. It's taking something you're passionate about, something that you're good at, and then start taking actions around that in a way where positively impacts others. And it doesn't have to be big. For some it is big, ending world hunger, right? Bringing water to every household, every family ongoing, so there's nobody thirsty, regardless of where you are in the world, right? So, but it could be small too. You love fishing, and fishing brings you a sense of peace and calmness, and you want to be able to give that to others who are stressed in their life. So you put together a weekend fishing trip, volunteer for some people that are stressed, and you want to educate them how fishing can bring calmness. I made that up, but you get what I'm saying, right? So purpose, making a difference in a positive way to other people, gives you a sense of freedom, because it allows you to view yourself as more self-worthy, more confident, which gives you that certainty about yourself. Okay. Now, let's look at the last one, which is emotional self-sufficiency. which I think you already know from our previous conversations why it's so important. Okay, so this obviously gives you freedom from your demons. Emotional self-sufficiency means you have dealt with your insecurities. When your bullets are gone, your demons are gone, you can experience emotional control and be able to be on top of it at all times. Okay, this allows you to get rid of them permanently. And what it in turn does, it allows you to be more confident in how you show up, because the behaviors that you've been executing as a result of your bullets are no longer there. Okay, you are no longer threatened by what your wife says or does, and you are confident that you can handle any situation in your marriage. Okay, now this confidence and the fact that threats and reactions are no longer kind of governing your life, your behaviors, and the interactions with your wife provide that huge sense of freedom for you to show up powerfully at home. And imagine now you have these three together, right? You're getting a tidbit of freedom because you know your terms. You're getting a tidbit of freedom because of your purpose, and you're taking purposeful action. And then you're becoming emotionally self-sufficient, which further gives you that sense of freedom. The three combined, super powerful, and it has an acceleration effect.
Yeah, and the freedom inside of all of that, like living by your terms and not having a choice around that. Living a purposeful life. Yes, you have a choice around what the purpose is, but actually putting time and attention and living a purposeful life and dealing with your bullets and insecurities. There is freedom in the fact that you have no choice but to live that type of life. You have no choice but to live by your terms. A solid, consistent, reliable man, a man who has responsibility and ownership, like lives by responsibility and ownership, will fully own his terms. And there's great freedom inside living by your terms. You know, you spoke about the stallion earlier and these great years of being out there and playing whatever a stallion does, like playing the field, you know, doing whatever he wants to do, whatever that looks like. There's a sense of you don't need to be responsible, right? You're just a free, wild stallion. And there isn't actually a whole lot of freedom in that. There's freedom in the irresponsibility of being a stallion. But what we're talking about is when you step into responsibility and ownership, step into, and a lot of stallions don't know terms. A lot of stallions, if they look back, will go, wow, I've compromised to who I am as a man time and time again, purely because I was ignorant to the fact of what terms were. I was ignorant to who I really was. And it's a journey, right? It's not about, hey, it's bad to be a stallion. It's part of the journey to actually figuring out who you are as a man. But inside the figuring out, you end up compromising yourself. But when you get to that place of responsibility and ownership, the freedom comes from, hey, I can eliminate all the BS. I can eliminate all the noise because I'm crystal clear on my terms. I can eliminate all the noise because, hey, I know what it's like to live a purposeful life. Hey, I know what it's like to deal with my bullets and insecurities. So yes, you're replacing the freedom of being a stallion with the freedom of actually being anchored in terms, anchored in purpose, anchored in doing emotional work. So as I said, it's part of the journey to go through that to become, hey, what am I about as a man? But there's great freedom in that when you figure it out.
It's so hard for men to wrap their head around that having no choice is a very powerful aspect of being free, because we live in a society where we're made to believe the more choices we have, the better off we are, and it's quite the opposite. Internal freedom for you to feel at peace is being so committed that you have no choice, and it's, it takes something to wrap your head around that, and then to experience it. A lot of work goes into that. Pretty much everything we've talked about, and a lot more. All right, I want to bring a video from our last live to your attention, right? So if you're looking to kind of build on what we talked about, last week's topic related a lot to that, which is the #1 cause of marriage failure and kind of how to stop it. There's some overlap and also nuances to that training, so I highly recommend, because it's from a different perspective. All right, and we give a lot of free resources. Again, the book with 3 trainings as well as a template. So if you want that, just put book in the comments. Also, we gave a free 1-hour coaching call with the training included. Put call in the comments if that's what you want. And there's a daily marriage mentorship program, which is through daily emails from me, which just put daily in the comments and we'll give that. Now, if you don't care about all the free resources or you have built trust enough with us that, hey, you know what, I want to kind of jump into this, get the community, get everything that comes with this, then I recommend you join our membership. This is not free, okay? And if you want the link to that, just put VIP in the comments, and then we'll shoot that over to you, okay? And then in the meanwhile, if you want the next video because you're all into the training, then #1 cause of marriage failure, go check that out, search it out on the YouTube channel, okay? Other than that, I think this is a wrap for this week. Any closing thoughts, sir?
I know, just build that consistency, right? Like, it's not about climbing the mountain in one step. It's about, taking those consistent steps towards the top. And yeah, sometimes you're going to slip, but you get back up and you keep pressing forward. That's it.
Okay. All right, gents, have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next week. Okay? Out.